Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast. My name is Fernando. Everybody calls me Fernie, and I am a professional psychic medium and spiritual teacher. And on today's podcast, we are going to talk about the time that I broke into an abandoned hospital. So it's going to be kind of a different episode, I guess, just because I'm not teaching you so much as I am sharing a story from my bag of tricks, right? From Fernie's bag of tricks. So if you don't know anything about me, check out my website, fernandomarron.com. And you can find out more about me, about the sessions that I do. You can also follow me along on social media. I'm on Instagram and YouTube, and I'm also on Facebook and Snapchat. And if you guys want to get a free session with me, go over to my Facebook channel, my professional Facebook page, sign up or follow along. And once a week, I do a Facebook Live where I get together with you guys and answer your questions. So, different ways to interact with me. But I'm glad you're here today listening to this episode. So let's rewind a few years, right? Let's go back a few years to when I was just a little tyke, right? And this was around the high school years of my life, back when I went to Austin High School. This was back in Houston, and I was really close with my cousin Jennifer, and she and I we kind of grew up like brother and sister. And she was the one who was always taking risks and going out there doing stuff she shouldn't be doing. I remember I was always at her house. I mean, just going to her house and having fun with her. And she was a little bit of a tomboy. So every time I went over to her house, she was always up doing the stuff that I wouldn't have done. Like she'd be on the roof, with her friends, and her mom would get home, and all you'd hear is her mom come pulling into the driveway and screaming, Jennifer, get off the roof, get off the roof. So it's, she was that kind of a kid. And I was more lay back, chill. I was always the one who followed the rules. I was always trying to be a good little boy, And even though this was high school and it wasn't that young, we weren't that young, but I mean, this was, in the earlier high school years. So she had a couple of friends who were just very much like people who like to go and have fun and try new things, and just put themselves in awkward situations where you could get in trouble, maybe even arrested. And they came up with this idea. They came up with this plan to go to this abandoned hospital. This was a hospital in the Houston area. Now it's a like a luxury loft complex, but back then this was just like an abandoned building, and it hadn't been a hospital for many, many, many years. So they wanted to go and check it out, and so we all got into this car. We drove over to a side of town that we had no business being in, and we were kind of not familiar with. And they didn't come very prepared. Honestly, none of us came prepared at all. I was just going along because I was totally open to it. Not only that, but I knew that I was psychic. I knew that I had unique abilities, but I was curious to test them. I was curious to like go and put myself in an environment where you're supposedly supposed to have like weird encounters and experiences, or paranormal encounters and experiences. And back then, this was in the 90s, so shows that were about like ghost hunting and going into abandoned places, they were starting to pop up here and there. So this was already starting to become kind of a norm back in those days. So we drove over to this place, right? And it was like dark. It was night. And we didn't come very prepared, so we didn't have flashlights. This was back before any of us really had cell phones. I mean, the iPhone hadn't even been introduced yet. I had a cell phone, but I didn't necessarily. Why did I have a cell phone? I mean, no, I didn't, because I didn't get a cell phone until after I graduated. That's right. Yeah. So this was back before I even had a cell phone. Oh my God! Like, what was wrong with us? So we didn't even have we didn't have phones with flashlights. We didn't actually have flashlights, and we went with candles, if you believe it or not. And not just like candles, like, candles inside of a glass container or vase. We went with these like candlesticks. So we're going to be walking around lighting up candlesticks at this abandoned hospital. That was the plan. Okay, right. God. So how we graduated high school, I have no idea. Honestly, no idea how that would have even happened. Um, so we get there and it's pitch black, and we're trying to find a way in, and the normal front entrance to the hospital is locked up, it's chained up, and there's notices everywhere, no trespassing. There's no trespassing notices everywhere. And of course, me being the, goody two shoes, I'm like, oh my god, we're gonna get arrested, oh my god, we're gonna go to jail for life, so dramatic. But so we decided to get in through the chapel, because this particular hospital had like 12 floors. It was a high rise. And it had 12 floors, and it had a chapel attached to one side of the building. And the chapel had these stained glass windows, but apparently somebody had already gone and probably broken in, because one of the glass pane windows was already broken. So we entered through there, and we got into the chapel, and oh my god, that chapel was huge. It was like it was like a full-blown 2-story church. And I felt, like, oh my god, this is sacrilege, because I grew up Catholic, and you don't break into a church, you don't like step foot into a place like that with impure thoughts and impure like mindset. So I was already feeling super guilty, and I felt super bad that we had broken into this hospital and we weren't going to the church, and we broke into the church. So but there was, still a crucifix on the wall, huge Catholic crucifix in the front. And there were no chairs. It was just an empty chapel. But, I mean, definitely it was old and abandoned. And so we were looking around, just kind of, it was so quiet. I remember getting in there. And there really was no light. It was so dark in there. Now we had our candles. And I think there was like a group of 5 of us, I believe. Yeah, I think there were 5 of us. And so we started walking around, checking it out, looking. There was the organ. The organ was still there. That was kind of attached to all the pipes that were behind the to the side, off to the side of the church. And as we turn around, we're kind of going through the chapel, looking at different places. And I wasn't so scared inside the chapel so much, because, I'm used to when you're in a church, you're safe, or there's nothing that will hurt you there. Well, back then, I mean, nowadays people are getting shot in churches, and you go to a mosque and you're you're taking the risk of getting shot. I mean, so anyways, back to my story, because I don't want to get into stupidity here, but we were in this church, and as we were turning around, looking into the connection to the building, because there's a connecting set of doors into the hospital, and we start walking in that direction. And the first thing we see when we walk into the hospital, right there at the entrance to the hospital from the chapel, there's this gurney just sitting there in the middle of the hallway. And it was this really dark, like long corridor hallway. And this gurney is just sitting there. And the gurney, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the original Halloween series, the original Michael Myers movies, where there was part 1 and part 2. And in part 2 of the original Michael Myers Halloween 2, there the hospital, they had the long hallways, the long corridors, and those like retro 50, 60 gurneys, where they've got leather fabric. It's like a leather fabric, but it's like a teal or aqua or turquoisey color. So it's got those colors. So it's one of these old gurneys, right? So you could tell this place has been abandoned for a while, because if the last gurney that they had working there was from back in the 50s and 60s, it must be old. So we see it just sitting there, and I'm like, oh my god. The first thing I think about as soon as I see that gurney is like, holy crap, like this is just like the movie Halloween. Like, this is some of the stuff that you would see in the movie Halloween. And then we started walking down the hallways, and I mean, it was so dark and so scary, and the feeling of this place was just intense and thick. I mean, the energy was just really thick there. And you look into, like, as you walk through the hallway, all these doors are open and they're all empty and dark as well. And these doors lead to more hallways, I mean, it's just, it was insane. And so we're walking through there slowly but surely, going through each floor. And we get to this one floor where you go to where the receptionist area would be at. You know, you get into the hospital and you go to the receptionist area and they tell you where to go or what you need to be doing there. And there's the phone was still there. The original telephone that they used was still there. And I kid you not, I believe it was a rotary phone. And it's kind of funny because I've been seeing these videos on YouTube of these kids where they're given like a rotary phone and they have no idea how to use it. And they're like, how do I use this phone? And you don't realize they don't know you're supposed to pick up the phone and then you put your finger in the hole that represents the number and then you spin the dial all the way to the other side and then you go to the next number and do the same thing, next number, the same thing, next number, until you finish your number sequence, and then it'll dial out to the person or to whoever you're trying to call. So they didn't know that they don't know that that's how it works, right? And if you're hearing this and you don't know what a rotary phone is, that's what a rotary phone does. That's what it is. And you should look it up on YouTube or on Facebook, because there are these videos of these kids trying to figure it out, and they have like 5 minutes to figure out how to use this damn thing, and they cannot figure it out in the 5 minutes that they have. So we get to this reception area and there's this rotary phone, and it's that teal green again. So I'm like, oh my God, this really is an old hospital. And there was an old cabinet there. And I mean, it just took me back to when I was a kid in the 80s, and my mom would go over to some of the old clinics and get, go to the doctor, and some of the old components from old hospitals and clinics were still there. So it just took me back. But it was so freaking scary in there. I mean, so scary. And it's not like I was bombarded or overwhelmed with energy from ghosts or from spirits. Honestly, I was kind of underwhelmed. I think my own fear and my own anxiety and my own thoughts were affecting me more than what I was actually feeling. And I think that's the case with a lot of these shows where they build it up to the point that the experience is this really weird, crazy, scary, demonic, evil, presences in the places and locations. And it's usually not like that. There's another video that I did back, and I probably have to make it public because I think I took it down. But it's an old video that I did with an old friend of mine, Ingrid, and we went to this prison, Lavaca. I think it was in Port Lavaca. I think it was in Port Lavaca. But we went to this prison over in South Texas, in this old 200-year-old prison. And it was kind of intense as well, but it was our own thoughts, our own fears, going through the dark corridors. It's a lot scarier than it actually is, and it's mostly your own thoughts and your own feelings that really make you nuts. So a lot of these movies, a lot of these shows that I watch, it just, every time I see something that is overly done or it's overly dramatized, I'm just like, whatever. Like, give me a break. Like, it did not happen that way, or you are just so full of shit. I mean, it's just, I think about it every single time I see one of these shows, because I'm thinking to myself, that's not how it happens. That's not how it goes. And they just over dramatize it in every single sound, every single this, every single that. In the house that I live in now, I mean, it's such a noisy old house, and the wood is always cracking and popping, especially when there's temperature changes, because it's an old house. Our house in Houston, that was an old house. That was 100-year-old house. That's a really old house. And all kinds of sounds we'd be hearing through in the house. It's an old house. Now, we did have an experience there, which I'll tell you after this, because that's a pretty cool experience. But anyways, back to this story. So we went walking through, the different floors. We went down to the morgue. And granted, I'm sure this place was filled with asbestos. And us being, teenagers, not knowing anything about what the hell asbestos was, we weren't prepared. We didn't even realize. And I think in the mortuary, there was probably black mold on the walls because, this place had been abandoned for so long and there was so much mildew and grime and stuff. So, it was really bad for us to be there to begin with. So we went through all the different floors, freaking each other out, scaring each other to death. We got to this one floor where there was a dead owl in the middle of the floor. The room. It was just laying there. And I was just like, why is there an owl just like laying there? But that was pretty weird. It was pretty odd. And we got to this one point where the floor felt different. There's something different about this one floor. And we start walking down the hall, and I remember I kind of just held back a little bit, and everybody else was walking ahead, and I held back a little bit. And at one moment, I just felt like I stepped into a fridge. I just walked into this one spot, and it was so cold. And then not only was the temperature different, but I also felt just extremely just a sense of fear, and almost as if I was kind of paralyzed by the fear, but it was just like sudden and overwhelming. And in that moment, in that instance, and it was just like, and it's just like in that moment, I felt different. Now, this is back when I was a teenager, right? I didn't really have the skill set as a psychic medium that I do now. Now if I wanted to tune in, I can just mentally tune in and see who this is, try to get some information, try to get some details, maybe talk to them and talk to them over to the other side if I can. Back then, I didn't have that skill set. So all I went by is feeling, because being a natural empath, that's what I naturally came up as an empath. For me, it was more of a physical, emotional thing first before I ended up developing more into the mental and what's the word? God, what is the word that I'm thinking about? Visual, the visual, the clairvoyant aspect of things. So it was more emotional for me back in the day, but I just felt this sudden, overwhelming, chill and a sense of dread and fear, and it just hit me so strongly, and I was like, oh my god. And I didn't know if I felt it, if it was my own fear or if it was actually coming from something. Now that I look back on it, I'm pretty sure this was probably a spirit or a ghost that was just kind of hanging out there. But they were probably more afraid of us than we were of them. Because here we are, this group of teenagers that just being rebellious and just going there looking for trouble. So I'm pretty sure they were probably more scared of us than we were scared of them. If you were in an abandoned building by yourself, or if you were in a building by yourself and a group of teenagers came into the building and you're all by yourself and they're just making a big sound and a ruckus and they're yelling at each other and whatever, wouldn't you be scared? Probably. So I'm sure this was just a spirit or a ghost hanging out, and they didn't realize that they were dead, or they were still attached to this place, and they were scared of us. So I think I was picking up on them. But we went through the entire building. It was kind of nuts, kind of crazy. Then we went back down, went back out through the chapel, and that was it. I'm telling you, it was kind of an underwhelming experience. It was cool for what it was. They should have turned it into a haunted house. I'm sure they would have made a killing if they would have turned it into a haunted house. But now it's this luxury lofts off of what is this? Off of I don't know what is this, what street this is off of, but it's in the medical center of Houston now. So this is where that's at. That was a pretty cool experience. Now, the other experience, the one that I wanted, that I was talking about, what was I going to tell you guys about? I was totally going to tell you about another story where I had another experience. So the other experience, the one that really just scared the hell out of me was, it's not that easy to scare me nowadays. As a kid, I would freak out and run. And I remember one Halloween, my cousins, they used to live out kind of, on acreage. And every year, they were kind of on the outskirts of the city. And every year they would, in the fields, they would create a haunted like maze. And it was kind of a haunted house / maze type thing, because he used to throw the biggest Halloween parties ever. So there was always like, I mean, probably a good 100 people at these parties. They were huge, and the party was always in this old barn that belonged to the family. So this was a pretty cool place to begin with, to have a party. I actually kind of miss those days, where they used to have these huge shindigs, but they would turn the crops into like this scary haunted maze. And one year I got up enough guts to do it, because I'm like, I want to do it, but I didn't want to do it, right? So I went with my aunt, because my aunt said she would go with me. And she's like, she was 50 something years old probably at the time that this happened. And so we all were going in a group, and then the group went ahead. And then the group had like maybe 6 or 7 people in it. And then my aunt said she'd go with me, just me and her. So we start going in, and as we're going in to the haunted maze, of course, people start popping up from the ground. I mean, like, all these trap doors open up from the ground that you didn't even realize are there, and they're all coming out, and then you're hearing chainsaws, and you're hearing all kinds of screaming and stuff like that. I was freaking out. I was flipping out. I was like, holy fuck, no, screw this shit, I'm done, I'm out of here. And I'm trying to run, and my aunt is holding on to me. My tia is holding on to me, and she's like, mijo mío, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Mijo's like Spanish for like my son or whatever. But she's like, mijo, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I'm like, no. And I was like freaking out, and I was screaming. And so I'm trying to get away, and she's holding on to me, and I'm like, she needs to let me go. So I'm like pushing her away from me, and I push her, and she like falls backward. She fell backwards into one of the holes that the people were popping out of. So she's holding on to me. I push her. She falls backwards into one of the holes. And I can hear them all laughing and cracking up that she fell into the hole, the people that were coming out of the holes. And I took off, and I ran into the middle of the group of people that had gone ahead of us, because I was like, I need to be with a group of people. And so, I mean, apparently she fell into the hole. The other guys all started laughing, and then they got, luckily she didn't hurt herself, but they were trying to help her come out of the dirt hole that I had thrown her into. So that was kind of funny. Poor Thea, right? But anyways, so the story that freaked me out, or the one that scared the hell out of me. So we had just moved into our 100-year-old house in Houston. And this was in the earlier days when we didn't have a lot of furniture. We hadn't really gotten a lot of furniture. And we had our bedroom, though. We had our set. And the girls, my kitties, I had taken them over to my mom's house because we had painted, and we didn't want them to smell the fumes. So we didn't want them to get sick or anything like that. And cats are really sensitive to smells. So there are certain smells that if they smell them, they can go into like cardiac arrest. Like it's deathly serious, right? So I took them over to my mom's because I didn't want them to smell any of the paint fumes. And we had prepped the house, and we had put paper on the floor. It's like a 3 or 4 foot wide paper roll that you roll, and we rolled it all along the edges of each of the rooms and taped it down, because when we paint, the paint wouldn't drip onto the floor. It'd fall onto that paper, and then we could just roll the paper up and throw it away. So that night we had and there was also plastic. We had some plastic in some of the rooms as well. But anyways, we were sleeping, and I'm dead asleep, right? I mean, no pun intended. I was dead asleep. But my partner Ed wakes me up, and he's like, "Hey, babe," and I'm like, "What?" And I'm like trying to wake up, and he's like, "Hey, wake up!" And I was like, "What?" He's like, There's someone in the house. Someone's in the house. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, babe, listen, someone's in the house. And I'm listening, and in the other bedroom, you can hear footsteps like on the paper, like someone's walking across the floor on the paper. And you can distinctly hear the footprints along the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, no, maybe it's the cats. And I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, the cats aren't home. Like, I took the cats to my mom's. They're not even in the house. So I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden you hear the closet door in that bedroom. You hear the closet door open and click open. And then you hear it close by itself and click close by itself. And, these are old doors. So when they open, you hear the the squeaking of the hinges. So we heard that, and then it opens, and then it clicked back close. And we were like, oh shit. So we both got up and freaked out, and we're like, turn on the lights, turn on the lights. So we thought maybe someone broke in. So our plan was to like get up and then go to all the rooms, turn on the lights to scare whoever's there. So maybe they can go out the same way they came in. Maybe it's through one of the windows in the in that room. So we get up, we run and start turning on all the lights and making all kinds of noises and sounds or whatever. And we finally go into that room, and there's nobody there. And turn on the light, there's nobody there. And we checked all the windows, all the doors, nothing's open, nothing's unlocked. Not only that, but that house, our house, it was designed with all of these bars on all the windows by an artist. And they're actually really, really pretty, like these designed artistic bars that look like these ivies going up the window. So they don't actually look like bars, they look like ivies, but they serve a double purpose, right? They're bars. So our house was pretty well protected. It's literally Fort Knox. But when we went into the room and we saw nobody there, I mean, I was just like, oh shit. Like, now I know that someone passed in my house before we moved in. A woman had a heart attack and died, and she fell in the kitchen as she had her heart attack, and her necklace caught the stove. So when the neighbors found her, she was hanging by her necklace on the stove knob by the neck, and she was just there cold and solid. So that's how they found her. And her name is Granny Green, actually. And I went ahead and when we first moved in, we did a smudging of the house just to make sure that everything was good, and there was no residual energy left behind, etc. So when we moved in, the energy of the house was fine. But that week we were doing renovations. I mean, that was one of the reasons why the cats weren't there, were because we were painting and doing some renovations, and we had like an extra door in our bedroom that was just redundant, like it served no purpose. So we had the door removed, and it's that night after we had the door removed and the wall sealed up that the sounds started up. So I had to go through the entire house, and the next day I went ahead and I smudged the shit out of the place. And then after that we were fine. It was, whatever was there was gone. Now, granted, this probably wasn't even a ghost. I mean, I'm pretty sure Granny Green is up in heaven. She's already crossed over, etc. But when someone lives in a space for so long, there is still residual energy that's there. And when you mess with the house, or when you mess with a piece of property, we're making some major changes, it shakes the energy of the house, and then it can cause a reawakening of old energy, right? So I'm pretty sure it was just old energy that was just getting woken up, or just aggravated. Not aggravated personally, like it was aggravated towards us, just it was being agitated, right? The energy was being affected, and so it started to reinitialize. So the energy had settled, and then by us having that door removed, it shook the energy up of the house. It messed with the energy of the house, and then started to cause things to go bump in the night. So I went ahead, smudged the whole house. It was fine after that, so didn't have any issues after that period. But it's just something that can happen. So, and I actually felt more in my own house than I did at that damn hospital, which is crazy, but it was a ton of fun. And if anything, I would suggest, if you ever feel a sense of desire to want to go to these places that you see on TV, that people are always doing these like expeditions where they're going to these haunted places, I would suggest trying one or doing one just for the hell of it. Just because, even if you're just going just to see if your own senses, if you can pick something up, it's totally worth it. I mean, but it can be very underwhelming. A lot of people think that they walk into an old haunted place and stuff is just going to be going crazy and causing all kinds of a ruckus, and it's not like that at all. There's a series that I really love, because you watch all these shows, and we have this whole genre of ghost hunting, etc., and they so over dramatize everything, and it's hard to believe it all, right? It's hard to really count it as something valid. So there's this show on BuzzFeed, if you ever watch this BuzzFeed show with these two guys. What are their names? They're both cute. I would totally super hot guys. Ryan Barciaga, I think, and the other one, I forgot the other guy's name, but they're both super hot. Anyways, they have a show on BuzzFeed, and they go into haunted places, and they do their own night they stay the night and see if they can catch evidence. And you got one who's super sensitive, and he's like jumping to every single thing that he can jump to, which is Ryan. And then you got the other guy, and he's more like even keel, and he doesn't really believe in ghosts or believe in all the haunted stuff. So he's more like down to earth. And I love both of them being there and the mix of them, because when you watch the show and you actually listen to the series, when you watch the show, it's realistic. It feels like just two guys who are going to a place that's supposedly haunted, and they're just being themselves. They're not really over dramatizing. They're not acting. They're just seeing if they catch anything. And sometimes they catch some stuff, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes totally overly trying to make it sound like it is something when it's not. So I like those kinds of shows because it gives you both perspectives, and then you have to decide whether somebody's really reaching or if there's actually something more to it. So, but all right, guys. Well, this was a blast connecting with you guys and sharing my experiences of being in haunted locations. I love you all, and I will talk to you guys next week. FYI, like I said, if you want to catch me on Facebook Live, you can get a free session with me. You can ask me a question or two. And if you want to have a session with me, you can just go to my website, fernandomarron.com. I'm also on Instagram, and I'm also on Snapchat as well, which I don't really post on there as much as I should. But I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to trying out my new telescope tonight. I'm probably going to post pictures soon so you can see those. But I got this new telescope, which was normally super expensive, but I got it at like dirt cheap. So I'm super excited about that. But I wanted to just thank you guys for joining in, and I will talk to you guys next time. Okay? Until then, bye-bye.